Hello and welcome to our podcast here at Hospice Peterborough, Conversations About Dying. I'm here with my friends and colleagues,
David Kennedy
and Red Keating.
And I'm Julie Brown. And today we were hoping to talk about how do we navigate the holidays when we're grieving. And we know this can be a particularly hard time of year. We often hear from our clients even feeling a sense of dread about this time of year. So we just wanted to give some space and some conversation to that today.
And that starts pretty early. I mean, it's amazing how people, start to get anxious about Christmas back in October.
Yeah.
And so they live with this holiday challenge for months. And so it is something we have to really face.
Sometimes it's one of the first things I hear from a family when they've had someone die. How are we going to do Christmas this year? How are we going to get through Christmas? And as you say, David, sometimes that's months before Christmas, but there's already that anticipatory anxiety around how can we possibly do this year?
Well, the consumer side of Christmas puts that in people's faces right after Halloween. Sometimes even just a little bit before these days, but that sense it's not just a day. It is several months, November, December, and in preparation. And we're told it's the most wonderful time of the year, and for some it isn't. It is not the most wonderful time of the year. There's a lot of pressure around having fun and being joyous and happy at this time of year.
And what's funny about that is it's actually not the most wonderful time of year for a lot of people, even if we haven't just lost someone to death, right? It's often a time of year that, like so many things in our human experience, that can be both joyous and wonderful and also hard and stressful and challenging and distressing and a whole bunch of other things as well.
It's the romanticizing of the holiday.
That's right.
But I do think that one of the major pieces is that Christmas, anyway, that time is really connected to memory. It's really connects to our past experiences, or the experiences that we vicariously have through the media or television. So but it's memory, it's what we did. And often, even in very difficult family situations, people can go in their memory to times when it wasn't, and maybe as a very young child. So one of the challenges, I think, of the holiday season around Christmas and Christmas Day has to do with that connection to memory. It's our experiences. It's what we've done.
That concept of tradition. And Julie, as you were talking, there were the expectations. Mm-hmm. The expectations that we're supposed to be up. Right. We're supposed to be happy. We're supposed to have unlimited energy at this time of year to boost us through and be constantly attending parties and attending and cooking big meals and getting all the shopping done, and the stress that mm-hmm. creates, that expectation that we're to make this the best time of the mm-hmm. year. Wow, that's draining.
And even the idea of just being really interactive and relational with people, mm-hmm. right? So even just the idea that I'm meant to be seeing people and sitting down to dinners and having conversations with maybe people that I haven't seen since last Christmas. So even just the demand on that, the conversational part of the holidays.
There's a lot of, a lot of buildup that happens and you're right about the expectations. And that a lot of that is our own expectation of ourselves and how we should be able to do this. And the expectations we put on ourselves to be present in all of those socializing when we don't feel like it and we don't have the energy to do that. And yet we somehow feel that if we don't do those things that we're failing mm-hmm. and we're letting people down. And I think it's a challenge. There's so many ups and downs emotionally that people will have in the holidays. and it can change in a minute, right? You can be in the grocery store and hear the carols playing, and the way you go, it just triggers things, right? And then there you are. One of the things I've found around that, when we talk about Christmas Day as being really connected to tradition and memory, I think what I have found is people get kind of blindsided because they feel like I get through Christmas, but then they get blindsided by New Year's, because New Year's is about what's coming.
That's right.
And that adds another piece to our grief, that now I'm living the reality that this person is not going to be here in this next year.
Right. Whereas
they've just gone through this Christmas with this person isn't here the way they were in all the past. So there's this roller coaster experience of emotions that happens. And boy, it can get really tough.
A few times the word, tired or fatigue has come up, and it's something that we so often think of grief as being, people that are sad, that we're sad. And of course that's part of it, but grief manifests in so many different ways, and our energy and fatigue is really one of them. And I think most of us feel fatigued by the holidays. And then as we approach the holiday season, if we're grieving, our energy is very depleted, maybe at an all-time low often when we are grieving. And so simple things like going out for lunch with some people that we might say to ourselves, why is that such a big deal? All of a sudden starts to be extremely exhausting when we're grieving.
And sometimes instead of being good to ourselves and acknowledging that and feeling our feelings and, making a decision that might be more about our own care of self, we feel like we're obligated to push ourselves through that, to go and match that joy and fun and that interaction with our friends or family when, like you said, we don't feel like it, but we don't feel we can give ourselves the permission to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And
no to that party or no to that dinner just because we're not feeling it.
And people often think they're helping by getting you engaged in these things, right?
Yeah.
So they think that's going to help you and push you to do that. When you're right, the fatigue and the self-care is really about, no, I can't do those things.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today, knowing that we were going to talk about this, that one of just the practical things that I like to say to people is, you do get to choose. There is choice. And sometimes when there's been traditions, we start to almost feel like there actually isn't a choice, but there is a choice. And even it can even just be a choice for this year. Might be for potential other ones too, but even if it's just a choice for this year for it to be different, we do get to choose. And you're right. Oftentimes sometimes we feel like we have to say yes to kind of minimize other people's distress, because the idea that, you could be sitting home alone, you have to come out. We do get to choose. And we do get to say to people, not today, or that's not the right thing for me. So giving ourselves permission to choose.
Yeah. And I think that, coupled with what you just said there, David, sometimes people, their best intention is to make the person feel better. And so they invite them, they make sure they're included. And then the person has that obligation to say no to more people when they really just maybe one night, I just want to be home alone. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to be alone.
Okay. Yeah.
And when we're alone, the feelings can intensify and get bigger.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. That doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. That just means that you got quiet and all those feelings were waiting there.
You gave yourself space.
And you gave yourself space, and grief needs space.
Yeah. And I think that's true too when we talk about the traditions, and sometimes people feel obligated to keep doing what they've always done. And I know that sometimes when there's children involved, younger children, parents feel, that they need to keep things going for the children's sake. And that's often true. But I think that if possible, it's helpful to ask the question, as you said, Julie, what do I need to do this year? Like maybe I don't need to do what I've always done. Mm-hmm. Maybe, and particularly when it's a spousal death, and there's just one person left in the house, maybe they don't want to put up the Christmas tree. Now, sometimes they want to, they need to do that. But I think that's the biggest thing, is to give yourself that choice and say, this year, and I think if we can say it that way, this doesn't mean I'm always going to do it this way, but what do I need to do this year?
Yeah. Permission to choose.
Yeah.
Giving ourselves choice.
And I don't know, one of the themes I've been hearing lately is I got through last Christmas and I got through it. And now I thought it would be over. I thought, this Christmas, next Christmas, I'm going to be just fine. And they're realizing those same feelings are kind of creeping back in. And I guess the realization that, this is going to be every Christmas. And how do I learn to live life and celebrate these times in our traditions differently without that person physically with me? They might be there in your memory. They might be there in your heart, but I'm living in this world differently. And I thought Christmas would be better this year, but boy, I have a really building up a sensation of dread as we get closer to Christmas.
Yeah, and to me that just so speaks to, the complexity of how we process emotions as human beings, is that we are capable of feeling such a range of emotions, and that as we move into this Christmas, we could be feeling a sense of dread and anticipation and excitement. We can't, so this idea that we can hold multiple feelings and experiences at the same time. Things are not, good or bad or positive or negative, that we can be experiencing this whole multitude, this whole range of feelings. And I think of my meditation teacher says, one of the things that we can just say to ourselves is, this belongs. So whatever feelings come up, this belongs here, right? And so if it's dread that I'm feeling, this belongs. If it's excitement or, sorrow, sadness, this belongs here. That we don't have to choose our feelings. We can just let them be there.
And I think this is a very important point, that those feelings and the complexity of those don't just disappear after the first Christmas. And I often just kind of encourage people as they come up to that second and third to say, all right, you may be able to deal with it differently. You will feel some of those same lost pieces, but you've had a year now to find a way that what is helpful for you. So some people, when I think about how they've dealt with their first Christmas, particularly if it's been, the death happened in the fall or in the late summer, so it was close. Sometimes they just decide, I'm going to go away. I'm going to, either take the adult kids and we're going to go to a hotel and we're going to go out of town and then the next Christmas they kind of say, well, that's what we did last year. Do we do that again? And saying to them, well, you might, but you don't have to again. Let's but sometimes, and then other people want this security of that. No, we're going to put the tree up the same way. We're going to use these ornaments. But again, I always encourage them to find something that represents where they are now. That grief piece is part of it. You can't just pretend that that's not there.
Right.
So what that looks like, it might be a special ornament on the tree. It might be doing one thing. It might be setting a dinner place at the table for that person. But you can't try to pretend that they're not there.
I was going to say that puts the reality in the moment and into the holiday. And like you said, it's sometimes, if you're going to do everything the same, it is good to do something different. It's also not, if you're doing everything different, well, you might want to keep some things that were meaningful. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But doing something that's different acknowledges the reality of the loss, right? That this Christmas is different. We can't have last Christmas, or 3 Christmases ago. This is a different Christmas, and we need to acknowledge that. And it's okay to acknowledge that, and it's okay to have some things that are different. It's okay to have some things that are the same. can't run from it. But doing something different kind of gives that, like you're really going to say the word again, acknowledges that sense that somehow, and we know how, this Christmas is significantly different from any other Christmas before, if it's the first Christmas.
I also think, going along with this, talk about them. Talk about the person who's died. Say their names. Reference a memory. Reference, this is what it was like last Christmas or 5 Christmases ago. There's often this sense of like, well, I don't want to bring up the person. I don't want to make the other person feel sad. Well, when we're grieving, it's there. Sometimes it's in the foreground, sometimes it's in the background. But when we bring up someone's name, we're not creating somebody else's grief. It's just allowed to have space in those moments. And so maybe you might reminisce about something and you'll laugh together. Maybe you might cry together. Maybe it'll be something else. But again, we're acknowledging it. We're giving it space.
I like to talk about encouraging people to unwrap the memories, like unwrap these, and even to do that around the table and just say, okay, what's a memory you have of this person? I remember one woman that I was working with, and her young child, her baby infant, had died, and that had happened in the late spring, early summer. And they spent the next Christmas at a large family gathering out of province, and they went and traveled there. And she said all of the family were there, the extended family, that there were probably 50, 60 people at this huge gathering. And I asked her, I said, so how was it? And she said, it was horrible. Nobody spoke my baby's name, or nobody asked me about them. And so you're right, there's that feeling of forgetting and that hesitancy that people have of name, but how important it is to include them in this. And sometimes just, if we talk about practical things to do, before you start your meal, just to do a toast or a moment of quietness or a memory sharing or something. And you're right. Of course, it'll cause tears, but that doesn't cause the tears, as you said. It just gives space for it. And how important is that?
We keep coming back to that theme, don't we, of making space for it, that it's not something we need to push away or push under. It's there. And so like anything else that might be there, we make space for it.
And it isn't going to wreck Christmas. if there's a moment where people feel that loss, feel that space that isn't occupied by that significant person, eventually someone will laugh. Uncle Bill will fart, and someone's going to do something that brings us up out of that, and puts us back in that other place. That it's like we're moving along and we're sharing stories, we're eating, we're drinking, we're listening to Christmas music in the background. All of that will continue to happen. Giving our grief space won't take any of that away.
And if it's if it's really a tough emotional piece and death happened maybe close to Christmas, I just encourage people, do what you have to do to survive this one.
Yes.
We'll deal with next Christmas. But this one, you may just have to survive. Yeah. What does that mean for you? And give them a hope that it's not always going to be this way. It's not always going to be this way. We'll always miss them, but it won't always feel the way this first one feels.
That acuity.
That acuity to it.
Yeah.
And pain, the sharpness of the pain.
Right.
In a very practical way, one of the things, and I'd like to hear some of your practical pieces, but one of the things I do say to people is that when you do get the invitations, because I want to come back to that side, it's a busy time, plus people feel they're helping you by inviting. I said, one of the things I would encourage you when somebody invites you for dinner, say, probably one of the best things you can do is to say to them, I would like to come, but I won't know until the day of. And if you're okay with that, then we'll go with that. But if you need to know an answer now about that, then I'll probably say no. The other thing I say to them is probably be careful about hosting parties because when people are in your house, you can't send them away.
Right.
But and take your own car when you go to somebody's house, because you can leave when you need to, and it's okay, and not to feel that that's somehow a real failure on your part.
And I guess off of that, don't necessarily commit to bringing part of the meal, because if you're not going to come,
right,
and you were bringing dessert, everybody's going to be really disappointed.
That's a good
miss
point.
out on the chocolate. But yeah, that's good advice. That's good advice.
I often say to people too is that, again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like, you could go and you can excuse yourself for several moments. You can go find a quiet place. You can tell someone, I just need to walk around the block for a moment, or I just need somewhere quiet. Because one of the things, again, another one of the ways that grief manifests is cognitively, right? So all that noise and chatter, and if there's music on, like it can really tax the brain. Like it might not even be an emotional reason you need to step away. You might just need to actually bring down the stimulation of the environment for yourself. So just, and you could set that up with the host ahead of time. I'm coming, but just so you know, sometimes my brain starts to get overwhelmed and I need to sit down. I need to go to a quiet place. And when I do, you don't need to come find me. I'm okay. And I'll come back when I'm ready. So, we can do some things in preparation, just to set it up better for ourselves. And that's one of the ways we care for ourselves. And that's one of the ways that to use Red's word, we acknowledge we're grieving, and I need to maybe do some different things for myself.
That goes with that expectations. If we understand that we can lower our expectations, then we can have those kinds of conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't understand that it's okay to give myself permission, which we're generally horrible at giving ourselves permission to not do things, right? But if I give myself permission to lower the expectation of myself, then I might have that conversation with the host of this evening's dinner party. If I'm not, I might not. Mm-hmm. And so if I allow myself to say, acknowledge this Christmas is different. I know that I'm not in my place where I would normally be, and that as a result, I'll be different at this dinner party or whatever the occasion might be. If you give yourself that permission, then you'll be able to say to that. And Julie, the point of saying, and when I do excuse myself, 5 people don't need to follow me downstairs in the basement for my 5 minutes of peace, because that's not peace. I'm okay. I'm just going to go and take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
I think it gets really difficult for some, sometimes the women who maybe they have their kids are grown up and gone away, and there's the always been, that's the home where everybody comes to for dinner, and so maybe the wife who's a widow may feel the pressure to cook and prepare all that food, and that's just overwhelming. So again, that idea of giving, and that's a huge piece, to give yourself permission to say, I can't do dinner this year, so one of you will have to host it, or we're going to go out somewhere. But that can bring a lot of guilt onto, I should be able to do dinner for everybody, mm-hmm. as I've always done. And maybe you can, and maybe you want to, mm-hmm. but I think there's many occasions where it's just, this Christmas I can't do the cooking.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking, it's a shitty life sometimes, right? We just should all over ourselves. Yeah.
You said should.
Should.
Yeah. Should.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I just heard there.
Yeah. But that's should. What I was implying. Yeah. So it's a shitty life, right? And it's not kind to ourselves when we hold ourselves to this bar, and this includes any time, right? When we're striving for that perfectionism, but especially when we're grieving, when we hold ourselves to a level or a bar or an expectation that is really just fundamentally not where we're at right then. So it's, think about this idea of kindness, that hopefully, if you're grieving, people have been kind to you to support you through this. And we also have to be kind with ourselves. And that does mean shifting our expectations of ourselves.
I sometimes think, too, because I've seen this not necessarily around the Christmas thing. But if I give myself that permission, sometimes that's all I need in my back pocket that gives me the energy to go out and do the things that I'm being invited to do.
Absolutely.
If I give myself permission to not, quite often it means I'm able. Again, but it's that idea of giving ourselves that permission, of owning it and just letting it be, and be in that moment, those feelings. One of the things, David, you mentioned earlier about kids, because this is also, it's been, Christmas isn't always happy, but it is a fun and magical time, and we create this time of year, and it's really important for kids. And so if there are kids in the family, you do have to sometimes muster up the energy. And kids won't stay in that really down, sad place. They'll play. They'll have fun. They'll look for that joy. They'll engage with that magic. They'll embrace that magic. And they'll fight with their brothers and sisters. And they'll do all the things that kids always do. And as a parent, if you don't have that energy, that can be really, really difficult. But just know that your kids aren't doing that to get on your nerves, or that they've forgotten if there's been a significant loss in the family. It's just that kids can't stay there as long as adults can, and they need to have that fun. And then we need to be able to sort of put the boundaries around that fun for them and let them have it. Because, we've been talking about adults pretty much, but there's kids also experience grief at this time of year if a significant person in their life has died. And they won't stay in that place all the time. And that can be very draining for parents.
And that's such a good point, Red. I'm so glad you said that way. And sometimes I've encouraged, the parent to say, is there somebody that you can come in to really just pay attention to the children and do that with them and enjoy it. I mean, not that you won't, but to really take that pressure off you having to do it all. The last thing I would say for myself would be that to encourage people to find something during the holiday season, some way of honoring that person in the grief. And there's lots of course, COVID has really put some of those pieces on hold, but I know there's still some memorial candlelight things that happen. You may decide to do something along that line. You may decide just to do something yourself. But I really encourage people to pay attention to it and to honor it. And that's the word that we use, that all of us use when we talk about grief that way. So.
Yeah. I guess I'd just also add that in terms of the pandemic is that be safe. Make your decisions based on your willingness to tolerate certain levels of risk, but stay safe this holiday season.
And I think I just want to, in closing, I think I would just say, it's already been said, but I want to just come back to, we've talked about the permission to choose, right? To make choices, the permission to drop the expectations, and permission to feel. All right.
Right.
Thanks,
Merry
guys.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.